The Honda HR-V started its life as a funky, boxy SUV that was available with 3 doors, but now it's a little bit more conventional as a small SUV, a rival for vehicles such as the Hyundai Kona, the forthcoming Nissan Qashqai, and the Toyota CHR. Of course, it now has a hybrid powertrain here in Australia that should help it compete with that aforementioned vehicle. Now, in Australia, Honda has moved to a fixed drive-away pricing model, and that means the E:/HEV L grade costs $45,000 drive away, and that's pretty steep for a small SUV. But if Honda's done a good job on making this hybrid as seamless as Toyota has done with their CHR and made the interior feel a step more premium than the second generation outgoing HR-V, then it may very well be worth the extra cost. But that's what we're going to be finding out in today's video when we take an independent look at this Honda HR-V. We're going to check out the interior, the practicalities, the running costs, the load space, and of course we're going to do the usual thing where we take this car out on the road here around the roads just outside of Melbourne on a fairly drizzly day, but hopefully that'll give us even more of an insight into what this HR-V is like to drive, because hopefully it has some of that driving magic instilled into it that Honda's managed to put in to the latest generation of Civic. But of course we'll be finding that out very shortly. I'd love to hear your comments on the HR-V in the comments section down below though. Do you think this new car is too expensive, or do you think it's premium enough to justify that price tag? Let me know your opinion down below, and if you haven't done so already, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe to the Chasing Cars channel. I don't think anyone would have accused the previous gen HR-V of being a particularly attractively styled vehicle, but the new car, I think, although it's not to everyone's taste, or at least I don't think it's going to be to everyone's taste, I've definitely heard some negative things, I do reckon that Honda has got a lot right on this thing, and they've been a little bit bold. It's got nice LED headlights here on this top spec E:/HEV L grade, and then you've got this lovely sort of body coloured front grille, which looks quite futuristic, and the whole styling package of this car is very clean and very unadorned. It almost looks like a 60s sort of race car, like an Alpha 105 series where you've taken the chrome bumpers off. Kind of gives me that kind of vibe. Of course, not in any way in the proportions, though I do think the proportions are quite attractive. It's a bit bigger than the old car. I think it's about 30 millimeters longer, riding on a 20 millimeter longer wheelbase. You can tell this one's the hybrid variant because it's got the little blue in the Honda badge, and we will have a test of the base car along very shortly. We haven't had access to one on this car's launch down here in Melbourne, but up in Sydney we'll be testing a 1.5 litre engine to see if this is the pick or if the more affordable non-hybrid will be the one to choose. And then down the flanks we've got these attractive piano black wheel arch mouldings. I think it's a little bit nicer than having textured plastic that you'd see on a Mazda CX-30. 18-inch alloy wheels are standard. They're fitted with really high quality Michelin Primacy tyres as well. This colour here is crystal red. It's a no-cost option. All colours are standard on the HR-V. I think there's 5 to choose from, though unfortunately at the moment in Australia Honda are not offering a contrasting black roof. I think that would really set this car off actually with its sort of coupe fastback styling that they've got going on here. I think would add a little bit of visual lowness to this car and make it just look a little bit sharper and more attractive. But of course, maybe we'll see that down the line in the future. There are a couple more ways you can tell this hybrid HR-V apart from its petrol counterpart. Those are this badge back here, obviously, blue Honda badging, and the fact that it has LED bulbs in the rear taillights rather than halogens. Bit cheap for the base model to go for halogens, but at least they all get this lovely full width LED signature that we're seeing more and more of in the market. I think it looks pretty crisp back here, but let me know your thoughts down below. What's not in doubt is the fact that this Honda HR-V is very practical. Opening this boot, we've got a really nicely finished load bay actually. You've got even more storage down here, which if this was a plug-in hybrid would be perfect for charging cables, but it's just a series parallel hybrid, so you can just put stuff that you want to keep out of people's eyes back there. You've also got this really nice load cover here, which is always attached. You don't have to bother about pulling it forwards or putting it away. Now, the boot capacity is rated at 304 litres, which isn't particularly huge, but as we'll see in a minute, it gets really practical when you start folding the seats down. I'll demonstrate that in detail. The other really nice touch is this second button here. It's not a lock button, but it is a walk away and lock. So I've got the key in my pocket now, and as I walk away from the car, you'll see that the power tailgate closes and the car locks. And I think that's quite a nice touch. It's a different way of doing things, and if you've got your hands full of shopping, that would work really well. The third gen HR-V continues Honda's trend for having very clever seating. As you can see, they fold completely flat all the way down to the floor, perfect for carrying bikes, but they also have tall mode, which I'll show you now. Further adding to the HR-V's practicality of being able to have fully flat seats are these magic chairs, which fold up into tall mode so you can carry larger items such as perhaps, I don't know, a smallish bookshelf or a bar fridge for your share house. And I think that's really cool in a car of such compact dimensions. So, the Honda HR-V's cabin. It's a tale of many stories actually. Instantly when you get into it, especially if you spent time in a previous generation HR-V, there is a bit of wow factor going and it looks a lot better. The technology package certainly brings this car up to date and the design is a lot more cohesive than the vehicle it replaces. But then you start to look a little bit deeper and you find scratchy plastics up here on the dashboard. You find the fact that both of these seats are only manual adjustable and that there's no sunroof, even though this car costs $45,000 driveaway here in New South Wales. In fact, here everywhere in Australia because Honda's national driveaway price. But then you dig even further, spend a bit more time and realize that Honda has clearly concentrated on making this cabin pretty easy to interact with and generally of high quality, especially the parts you touch a lot. For example, this steering wheel is appointed in a lovely leather material. It's gorgeous to look at, a nice size, and it's just nice to hold when you're out on the road. It's got buttons to interact with this 7-inch partially digitized driving cluster. You can't show a full satellite map like you can in a Volkswagen T-Roc or a Skoda Kamiq. However, you do have the ability to show turn-by-turn instructions. There's also no head-up display, which is something that other rivals do offer. In the center screen, we've got a 9-inch touchscreen here, which is very responsive, and the graphics are different to pretty much all other cars on the market, except for this car's relation, the Honda Civic. It's different, and it certainly has a bit of Honda-ness about it. You've also got wireless Apple CarPlay, which is great, though only wired Android Auto, and there's also no wireless charging pad in this car. You've just got 2 USB-A ports there. But it is easy to interact with things like the HVAC controls. They're all physical down here. You've also got 3-stage heating for both of these front seats. And although they're not appointed in leather, I'm actually going to not mark this car down for that in my book because this cloth is actually really high quality to the touch, feels nice and premium, and it has the added benefit of not getting hot on summer days or cold on winter days like the one we're experiencing right now. And of course you've got heating, as I mentioned before, and heating for the steering wheel too. Practicality wise, the HR-V really kicks some goals as well. You've got this nice rubberized mezzanine 2-level storage tray here, 2 cup holders here. There are a total of 8 beverage holders in this vehicle according to Honda, decent sized door bins, enough for a 1-litre camping bottle, and a fairly useful central bin here appointed in leather. The only other thing I'm going to criticize is the fact that this gear shifter is rubberized. It's not coated in leather, but apart from that, yeah, it's pretty nice. Finally, I'll add to the HVAC. Honda's done this thing where we have 3 modes for the vents. So instead of just having an on or an off or a slider like you do in a lot of other vehicles, you've got a diffusion mode or a straight in your face mode or off. And I've been experimenting with that and I think it actually works really nicely. It doesn't blow cold air directly into your eyes. It gives a nice dispersed feel. So yeah, that's the interior of the HR-V. It's certainly come a long way, but whether it's best in class or not, I'm not entirely sure, though at least all of the high traffic touch points feel really quality and the build is fantastic. The Honda HR-V's rear seat is absolutely huge, but there's one caveat, and that is the fact that in Australia, this small SUV only has 4 seats. Now, apparently this is to do with some slightly strange ADRs, so Australian design rules, regarding rear passenger seats, which means that you couldn't have a center seat and a center seat belt for this vehicle. Now, that's not bad at all if you're only ever going to carry 4 people, but what that means is that these 2 outboard seats are supremely comfortable. There's a little kick-up outside, little bolsters to hold you in if you're driver happens to be going around corners like a bit of a madman. You'll be totally comfortable back here, and I reckon, you know, swings and roundabouts, that's actually quite good. Honda has also said that there will be a 3rd SUV added to the lineup that's going to sit between this HR-V and the size above CR-V, hopefully with 5 seats, and it may take the shape of the American HR-V, but we'll have to wait to find out about that shortly in the future. But for the moment, what else have we got going on back here? Adjustable air vents, great to see, 2 more USB ports, a little storage cubby down there in the center console. The materials do go to scratchy back here, but you do have a nice soft padded armrest and a coffee cup holder, I guess. You couldn't really fit a very big bottle in there, maybe a small plastic bottle of a Solo or something like that. So that's cool. You still got the same cloth back here, but as I said in the front, that's really no bad thing. Little flip down armrest as well, 2 more cup holders. Doesn't have any sort of thing to stop it falling onto the bottom cushion, but it's fairly comfortable when it's in operation. And this top end model does also have tinted rear windows as well, though they don't roll all the way down, they don't go all the way into the door cards, and they're quite narrow. The other thing about this car is that even though I've got heaps of leg room, heaps of toe room as well, and a decent amount of headroom, the front seat is 10 millimeters higher than it was before in the HRV, and that sort of blocks my view back here. So if it was shorter, I'm 6'2", so if I was sort of 5'10", I might end up getting a little bit car sick in the back due to not being able to see out over the front seat. But yeah, I can't really comment on that because I haven't spent an extended time in the back seat of this car. Hopefully we'll get all the SUVs together and be able to test them in a proper mega test shortly. But all in all, if you only ever want to put 4 people in your small SUV, then the Honda HRV is going to be the best in class. So the hybrid may be 105 kilos heavier than the regular petrol model, but because of that electric motor, this car gets fantastic fuel consumption. The ADR 8102 rating is 4.3 litres per 100 Ks. Now in our test on the way out here, we've averaged 4.8 litres per 100 kilometres, and after coming up quite a steep hill quite quickly, that has gone up to a little over 6, so that's not really indicative of real driving. So I reckon 4.8, 4.9 is what you're going to be able to achieve in the real world. Honda keeps servicing really simple for all its products here in Australia. $125 is all it's going to cost for the first 5 services. That means over 5 years or 50,000 kilometres, it's going to cost you $625 to maintain your Honda HRV. That's pretty affordable, and there's no difference between the hybrid or the petrol variants. As for insurance, the median budget direct customer in the last 12 months paid $838 to comprehensively insure their new Honda HRV. Now your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as where you live, your driving history, how old you are, and whether or not you garage the car. So, outside the new Honda CR-V looks better, inside it feels better, and it keeps all of the practical touches. But what is it like to drive out on the road? Now this hybrid variant is the more expensive of the two. There's sort of a $10,000 gulf between the two variants, and we will come back to driving the 1.5 later on, but for now let's just focus on this hybrid powertrain, which is built around the same 1.5 litre petrol engine under the bonnet. Here it has a slightly different compression ratio of 13.5. In the petrol car it's 10.5. Now outputs for this vehicle with that electric motor are 96 kilowatts of power and 253 newton meters of torque. Now those outputs are not exactly going to set your world on fire, but that's not really what this HRV is about. It's being frugal and pretty refined actually, and both of those things are true most of the time. It sends power to the front wheels using a CVT, a single speed CVT transmission with stepped gears and stepped ratios, so when you're pushing on and the petrol engine takes over, it doesn't sound so tinny and dinny and doesn't rev all the way to the red line. It's actually not too bad most of the time. And around town, it feels very refined in its switch from petrol to electric mode. The petrol engine doesn't hang around for too long. It doesn't keep going while you come up to a set of lights, unlike some vehicles such as the Haval H6 hybrid we had to go in recently. This feels really up there with Toyota in terms of the levels of polish of this engine. The only thing that does break the ice a little bit is when you have to kick it down to do an overtake or something like that, and this car makes quite the din. So I'll show you that right now. You can hear that 1.5 litre petrol engine really kicking in, but regardless, I do think this is going to be the pick over the basic petrol engine car, because that car only makes 89 kilowatts of power and 145 newton meters of torque, and it is about 100 kilos lighter than this car. The Honda HRV isn't heavy though, at 1390 kilograms for this car that we're in now. That's the rated curb weight here in Australia. I think that's not too bad. Now let's move on from the engines and talk a bit more about the handling of this vehicle, because as you may have seen if you're a long-time subscriber and watched Nathan Ponchard's review of the Honda Civic, Honda has been putting a lot of effort into making their cars feel a little bit crisper out on the road than they ever have done before. Now this car is based on the same platform as the Jazz, so it doesn't have sophisticated multi-link rear suspension. It's just got a pretty basic torsion beam setup, though it is well insulated and you don't get any of that sort of thwump through into the cabin from the rear end when you're out here on roads like this. This car also has lovely steering. It's light, and especially light at town speeds, but it weights up nicely around country roads such as the one we're on right now and gives good confidence to the driver. It's also got quite a quick rack, which is really pleasing, and it means this SUV does have a little bit of dynamism to it. As for whether it's the best in class, well, we'll have to find out in the future, but I think in terms of front end polish and dynamism down a good piece of road, this thing actually does a really good job. The brake pedal feel as well for a hybrid is pretty natural. You don't have that weird sponginess that hybrids used to have. It all feels pretty decent. Not perfect, not quite as crisp as a normal brake pedal, but pretty decent. You also have a different mode on the gear selector. You can pull it back to B for braking mode, and then you've got adjustable regen braking that you can use the paddles to ramp up or ramp down depending on what you want. That's pretty cool in a hybrid. It's not a full-on one-pedal driving scenario like you'd see in a full electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid, but it does mean you can control how you want to drive this car. If you want a little bit more of that retardation coming up to a set of lights, you can dial it up with a couple of extra pulls on the paddle, and if you want to just cruise down a hill and roll on electric power, you can do that as well. And when you do that in the HR-V, it is a really refined little SUV. It does feel premium in its driving experience when you take that into account. The road noise insulation, even on these fairly large 18-inch alloy wheels fitted with Michelin Primacy 4 tyres, is really impressive. They're 225 wide and a 50 series tyre, and they do offer good insulation from the road in terms of sound and also in terms of ride quality. This thing's ride is really nice out here where we are right now. Very smooth, great body control, and good damping control as well. It doesn't ever feel waywards mid-corner. It tracks the line that the driver has selected really faithfully. However, around town, it does feel like it might be a touch on the stiff side. Certainly it's firmer than something like a Hyundai Kona with a 2-litre petrol engine, though it might not be as firm as a Volkswagen product. But yeah, I think the CHR is probably a more comfortable car than this thing around town, though the Honda is really nice out here on the open road. So that's a really big win for me. Now on to safety, and the new HR-V is definitely better than it was. Honda has updated its sensing suite of safety technology, and that means you get things like a really decent adaptive cruise control, nice lane keep assist that blends into this highway drive assist mode that works actually much better than any Honda I've experienced before, because I haven't driven the new Civic in depth on a highway, but yeah, that works really nicely. You've also got frontal AEB with pedestrian, cyclist, and junction functionality, which is all great stuff, but there's no reverse AEB on this car, though you do have just a single reverse monitor. You don't have a 360-degree surround camera, but you do have rear cross traffic alert, and on this higher spec hybrid model, we get blind spot monitoring as well. So the safety assistance suite is pretty decent. This car hasn't been rated by Australia's crash testing body ANCAP just yet, but it has got 4 stars in Euro NCAP safety testing. So it's probably not going to get 5 stars for here in Australia, but we'll have to wait till those results come out. So a little summation on how the HR-V drives. I think this car has really come a long way. And yes, the hybrid powertrain is really good as well. We're gonna have to wait to drive the less powerful than before base model petrol engine though, because the value proposition on that car I think is a little bit worse than this hybrid, because you're spending $5 grand more than the outgoing HR-V in base model spec to get an engine with a little bit less power. But anyway, we're going to find out how that car goes in the next few weeks. But for now, let's just appreciate that this hybrid version of the HR-V has really come a long way. It feels nice, polished, and it's still fun to drive out here on a good country road. The new Honda HR-V drives really nicely. It's got a crisp steering response and perhaps a best-in-class chassis that will have to conduct a bit of a test between this car and its rivals to really confirm whether that is indeed the case. But one thing's for sure, that hybrid system is really fantastic. It's clear Honda's been working on it since that 1999 original Insight to what it is today, polished to a really fine finished, almost as good, if not maybe slightly better than Toyota's system. There is the elephant in the room though, and that is the $45,000 driveaway price. Now, it has come along way in terms of interior premium fit and finish, but there are some things like the lack of a sunroof option and the fact that it doesn't come equipped with leather as standard that mean this car maybe doesn't feel as fully specified as that 45 grand would lead you to believe. But I'd love to hear your comments down below. Do you think this new HR-V is worth the money? I'd love to hear it, because it's definitely a big improvement over its predecessor. Of course, while you're down there leaving a comment, I'd also love it if you could hit subscribe to Chasing Cars if you haven't done so already. And as always, thank you very much for watching.